Good evening, everyone. If you could please find a place to sit, we would appreciate it. We're going to get going here in just a few minutes. There's lots of seating over on this side of the room, so please feel free to check it out, and we'll get going here in just a few. Good evening. Hello again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Amanda. I'm the Communications and Public Involvement Director, and we're really grateful to get to spend some time with you this evening. It's my pleasure to welcome to our stage Mayor Jenny Arndt and our City Manager Kelly DiMartino, who are going to share some wonderful highlights with you all. But before we get started this evening, I also want to welcome my colleague, our Equity Officer, Claudia Menendez, who's going to be reading our land acknowledgement statement.
Good evening, everyone. The City of Fort Collins Land Acknowledgement was co-written by Native American and Indigenous community members here. We acknowledge and honor the land situated within the City of Fort Collins as the original homelands of the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, Comanche, Kiowa, Pawnee, Shoshone, Lakota, and Ute peoples. This area is an important site of trade, gathering, and healing for these Native nations. These lands are home to a diverse urban Native community representing multiple Native nations and Indigenous peoples. Despite forced removal and land dispossession, they continue to thrive as resilient members of our community. We are grateful for Native community members and honor the rich cultural heritage they bring to our collective community. We further recognize and value their social, intellectual, economic, and cultural contributions. The City of Fort Collins is committed to supporting, partnering, and working with the Native and Indigenous community in Fort Collins. Thank you.
I love that video. Good evening and welcome to the State of the City. Thank you very much for everyone being here. I'd like to give a shout out to our City Council who's here in force. Every single one of you are here. Thank you for coming. And I want to also recognize other electeds in the audience from the county, and I see former electeds here too. So thank you for joining us tonight.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly DiMartino, City Manager, and am really looking forward to spending some time with you this evening. I also want to just do a quick shout out. There's so many community partners who are here, so welcome to all of you, and also our city staff. I see many of our city executive leadership team in the room and others who support every day the services that you all receive. So again, just thanks for being here, and we're looking forward to a fun evening.
Great. Tonight's theme, that when we started planning this, we thought we were talking about everything that happened last year and things that we're looking forward to. So we landed on the theme of fortifying our community. We'd like to preserve what we love about Fort Collins, build on our positive momentum, and make meaningful change and to make Fort Collins more like the Fort Collins that we already know. We participated in a year-long effort last year with the German Marshall Fund called Cities Fortifying Democracy. So it's kind of a continuation of that, and it's also a nod to our partners at Colorado State University with a complementary theme of the Year of Democracy and Civic Engagement.
And I think part of the reason that this theme, fortifying our community, really resonated with us was just knowing that the conversations are becoming more challenging across the community and across the nation. And we see the dynamics that happen in other communities. We know it's an election year, which always tends to elevate that a little bit. And so as we think about fortifying our community, we really want to focus on that role of civic engagement and how important that is.
Speaking of civic engagement, we had what I consider to be sort of the ultimate civic engagement with the first ever November municipal elections last November, where we had a voter increase of 20%, so 50,000 people came out to vote, which we very much appreciate. We re-elected myself as mayor, 2 council members were re-elected, and 1 newly elected council member.
And another way that we saw fortifying of our community was the voters very generously supported an increased commitment to our city by investing with a half-cent sales tax that is going to go half of that to our beloved Parks and Recreation system for asset management. That's something we've been talking about for a long time. And then also the other half of it will be split between climate and transit, which we know are both really important priorities for this community. So as we get started, some of you may be like me and you like to have a little bit of a roadmap for how this is going to go. So just so you know what to expect, we're going to start by sharing a few of the highlights and accomplishments from 2023. We then want to talk about some of the council and organizational priorities. We'll shift to talk a little bit about future and some of the trends that we're seeing and how we're planning around that. And then finally back to this theme of democracy and civic participation. So as we start, another thing that you're going to hear in addition to fortifying our community is a resounding theme around partnership and how we can't do this work without partnership. So we want to start with a couple successes. One is the Southeast Community Innovation Center. This is something that the voters approved back in 2015. We are thrilled to be in partnership with Poudre School District and Poudre Libraries, that we are now in the place of having a location for that facility at Fossil Ridge High School, the land adjacent to that, and we're going to be hopefully starting design this year. So some great news there.
Great. Another great partnership due to the voters was the opening of the Behavioral Health Center in December. That's a partnership with the county, the city, multiple mental health providers. It opened in December, and they've already evaluated 900 people in the first 60 days with space to expand. We also had the 9/11 Memorial open at Spring Park, which broke ground last year, and that was a partnership between City Give and Poudre Fire Authority.
One of the things that I think about are how these facilities, some that we've talked about, other spaces that are special spaces in our community, serve as places of belonging for people, and we want to have places of belonging. Our parks and recreation and natural areas are those spaces of belonging in many cases. So last year we celebrated the opening of Dovetail Park on the east side of town, and this park, one of the things I wanted to highlight is that it's really adapting to some of what we're hearing from our community about new trends we want to see. So if you haven't been there, you will find things like bocce ball or ping pong I'm a Nebraska girl, so my personal favorite is cornhole. Find that. Or if you want to just chill, there are hammocks there in the park now. And again, places that people can really appreciate nature and just relax.
Another thing the voters and the people of Fort Collins really value are our natural areas. So Kestrel Fields Natural Area opened with 73 acres that connects the foothills and the Poudre River. It has an agricultural tenant. It has habitat for birds, insects, and other wildlife.
So a little bit behind the curtain, when we start preparing for State of the City address, we kind of put together a brainstorm list of all the things we want to cover and quickly realized that there could be about 3 hours worth of conversation. We're not going to do that to you tonight. So we are going to just do a few lightning rounds of fun facts we want to cover. Thank you. Okay, here's the first one. Natural Areas hosted 264 activities for 11,000 participants last year.
Through a Parks and Wildlife grant, the improved habitat for the plains top minnow fish, a Tier 1 species of greatest conservation need.
The number of times that people participated in our city recreation programs last year, over 1 million. Yeah.
The Lincoln Center sold 135,000 tickets to 1,030 events.
And the Gardens on Spring Creek hosted 22,000 attendees for the Garden of Lights and 6,800 for Pumpkins on Parade.
Art in Public Places painted its 400th Transformer cabinet mural this year.
So people love our places.
That's right. We're going to shift from that lightning round into our police services and highlight some of the innovative work in public safety that's happening in Fort Collins, because it really is a cutting edge in terms of safety, health, and a vibrant community. When I was talking with the chief about some of the innovations that's happening in police services, he said, you know, Mayor, we just don't need a badge and a gun in every single instance. So they've been working hard through the training center and all the other, we're going to talk about some of the programs we do to make sure that we're healthy and safe. So how do we do that, Kelly?
Yeah, a few things that I would highlight. As the community grows, we're continuing to think about how we provide that safety for our community, and some of that is looking to maybe more non-traditional ways of doing policing. And so some of that's special units. I also really applaud, again, the chief and his leadership team in thinking about how do we utilize our community service officers. So in addition to things like traffic and going out to car crashes, they're also really working to actively build connections with the community. So I love hearing stories of them coming up with ideas for cups for lemonade stands and then taking those and actually delivering them to the kids, or doing book drives for books for non-English speaking children, again, so that there's a way that they're able to connect with them. A thing that we are expanding this year is our use of criminalists. And so if you think about some of the detective work and some of the work that's happening in the cyberspace now, again, the skills that are needed for that work is starting to shift. And so by using criminalists, we're able to really get that work done in an efficient way and keep our sworn officers free to be out in the streets and doing, again, some of that work that actually requires their certifications. And then the other thing I've just highlighted in the how we're doing it is through partnership. So a lot of collaboration, whether that's Larimer County Sheriff, whether that's Poudre Fire Authority. Many of you probably read the news article about the arsonist over on Timbervine. And again, just appreciate how closely those agencies were able to work together to get that resolved for our community.
That's great. So all this hard unspoken work, all the hard work behind the scenes of reimagining how we do policing has a concrete evidence in the Fort Collins average annual crime rate is 7.7% lower than the statewide average, which is amazing. So the police department here is being recognized externally. Congressmen have called me, the attorney general's called me. How do you do it? What's happening up there? Can we come up and learn and try to replicate what you're doing in Fort Collins across the state? So that's very exciting.
Yes. All right, I think it's time for a lightning round.
Police response time to priority 1 calls, the emergencies that require immediate response, average 4 minutes and 48 seconds, which is 27 seconds faster than the target.
The average time to answer a 911 call in Fort Collins is 4.11 seconds. That's compared to a national standard of 15 seconds. So
Hope, the homeless outreach and protective engagement team answered 1,900 calls for service, cleaned up 1,100 camps and trash sites, and collected 2,000 sharps.
And our mental health response team handled 1,850 calls for service. And again, what I'd highlight here is that nearly all of those ended without any use of force, which is the goal. Okay, we're going to shift gears and talk about another accomplishment from 23. Somewhere I saw, yes, Connection. So Connection, we had a big accomplishment last year in that we completed the build-out for our single-family residences. We know we still have a lot of work to do to reach all of our multifamily. That's about 40% of the residents in Fort Collins are in multifamily dwelling units. But today, as of today, this is a brand new number as of today, we have 18,039 customers. So we're very happy about that. And there's more information out in the hallway if you want to learn how to be a customer and you're not yet. And you know, when we started this, prepping for this, again, it was in the 17,000s. So we just see that number continue to grow.
Great. I've heard it's the largest capital project in history, which I find remarkable because it's almost completely invisible.
Yes, just in Fort Collins history, to be clear. I mean, maybe in history, but we're going to go with our history.
In our history.
Yes, and we are looking at expanding again through partnership with the Larimer County, some grants that they're doing to try and expand service into underserved areas in the county that we're going to be able to support that work.
And you know what else I really like about what we're doing with Connection is that we're also living out our values of equity and inclusion through the programs. And do you want to talk about that? It's one of my favorite.
Yeah, one of the things that we do is 6% of all of our Connection revenue goes to digital equity, and that allows us to do a couple of things. So one, we can provide a $20 a month rate for gig speed, including Wi-Fi connection. And again, when we hear a lot of other places talk about digital equity, what they do is actually scale down the speed or the service level, and we are not doing that. We are providing the full 1 gig. So that's a really important decision that council and team made early on. And then the other thing is that we're hiring a digital inclusion specialist. We have someone on board to help really ensure that it's not enough to just have a service, but that people know how to get it and are trained and able to use the technology that goes along with it. So that's some work we're proud of.
That's great.
We have a lot of work going on in equity. If I can just highlight a couple other things that have occurred this year. So we were able to complete our equity and inclusion plan. So that is something that Claudia and her team have completed and are going to be implementing over the, I'll say, coming years, because it's an ambitious plan. The other thing is that we're really having a lot of support and work from our Native Nations Community Advisory Panel. So they helped certainly with the land acknowledgement that you heard here, but really focusing on building relationships, deepening trust, and they are giving us guidance on land management practices and things like protocols for tribal consultation. So one example is in some of our utilities, our stream rehab projects, our river restoration work, that's a space where they're engaging.
Great. Another place where we're really working on equity is through our business sector, and the No-Co Biz launched, which was really cool. It happened at the Lyric, and a bunch of us were there, and just the energy in that room and the networking, the launch of that program was just really exciting. So that is a sustainable business initiative with bilingual resources to foster equitable growth and environmental responsibility.
Absolutely. And again, the connection places for people. So just places for people to connect. We are doing a lot of community celebrations in partnership with other organizations. So continue to see interest in our Juneteenth celebration, the Latine and Hispanic Heritage Month, Native American Heritage Month, and Pride Month. All of those were really just great, vibrant events in partnership with other community organizations.
As we sort of wrap up some of last year's accomplishments and highlights, let's talk a little bit about the American Recovery Plan Act, ARPA projects, and many of those were also related to equity work. All $28.1 million that was allocated to Fort Collins supported 50 plus programs in 2023. The Equity Grant Fund of $200,000 to local organizations serving groups significantly impacted by the pandemic.
Yeah, and the way we allocated that money, again, our city council really chose to get that money into the hands of community members. So direct programs in many cases, that has really helped during this COVID recovery period. We do also recognize it's going to be a challenge as those dollars come to an end of figuring out how we either make trade-offs with other programs or if some of those gaps will exist and needs may need to be met in other ways. We have also, though, tried to utilize those dollars where we can to make impacts that are not one-time but will have an ongoing effect. So, for example, we made some investments at Northside Otsalon Center to expand our childcare spaces. And so starting this summer, we're going to be able to accommodate an additional 240 kids this summer, and also next fall, the universal pre-K. So again, an ongoing need that we're going to be able to have an impact on.
That's great.
Okay, so another way that we're trying to sort of maximize these financial resources is by investing and soliciting grants, and the city has been very successful in being able to attract grant resources to our community. Last year, we had $29.4 million in grants infused into our community. And so it is time for, guess what? Lightning round of where some of those dollars went.
Ready? The Timberline Recycling Center got $295,000 to purchase new equipment, allowing it to receive more recyclables, improve service reliability.
Our utilities energy services received $693,000 from the bipartisan infrastructure law to support zero carbon code standards for future development, and we were the only municipality that received dollars from that.
$24 million came in that was dedicated to engineering and capital improvement projects, including $10.7 million to design and build the Foothills Transit Center, which will connect to future West Elizabeth Bus Rapid Transit.
And $745,000 to FC Moves for safety improvements near Zach Elementary School.
And $2 million came from the state to support the design and construction of the Southeast Community Center.
So we've talked a lot about kind of projects so far, but Mayor, for those following the roadmap, we want to transition and talk a little bit about some of those council priorities and some of the work that you all had on your work plan last year.
Sure. Well, it was your work plan.
Our work plan. Collectively,
So
our
in,
work plan.
In 2021, the election was in April, so we had, if you remember that. Shortly thereafter, our council met and we established 31 priorities. Not all equal in weight, some were more broad in scope and some were more task-oriented. But during the hard work of the city staff, really, in those 2 years, they worked on air quality, reducing plastic pollution, protecting river flow, work concerning the circular economy, establishing a juvenile diversion program in our municipal court. We adopted the gray water code change. We adopted gender equity and sales tax. We increased access to childcare, and we advanced regionalism, just to name a few. The Election Code Committee referred to the voters ranked choice voting, which you all approved of. So in the fall of 2025, we will be seeing ranked choice voting in our municipal elections. And we also mentioned that we moved the elections to November. So.
Yes, and that gave us a little bit of time between that November election for council to onboard before going into retreat to start talking about this year's priorities. And so do you want to talk a little bit about where we are for this year?
Yeah, I think we used that time well. We welcomed Melanie Patyandi onto council. And we also had some time to reflect back on the last 2 years of that council, 2.5 actually, and to look forward. So we really focused this time, and we're going to take some votes tomorrow night on the 12 proposed priorities. If you're interested, you can come or tune in tomorrow night. But what we were trying to do was really focus on broad, not task-oriented things, right? So to set priorities for the city that sometimes are mostly things that we already had in progress. But one of them, for example, was to really prioritize the 15-minute city and the active modes, right? Really think about how we're using our integrated intentional approach to our economic health, right? To operationalize resources to build and preserve affordable housing, to create pathways for zero waste and really emphasize prioritizing that, and then making government more accessible, approachable, and sometimes fun. As fun as we can.
It's going to be my biggest challenge. How do we make it fun?
Oh no, we got this.
Now, one of the things that struck me listening as council was debating about what do they want those priorities to be and those focuses, again, is how much you all, you have your perspectives from doing the governing work of the city, and you also really are bringing in what you're hearing from the community. And there's a lot that goes into thinking about it from what are the community goals and the values and the priorities of the community. And so we wanted to take a minute and show a quick video about some of our public engagement efforts and how we hear from the community.
Public engagement is at the heart of any thriving community. It's about building relationships, having an opportunity to share ideas, and to also provide transparency and an equitable process throughout. Engagement is really about more than just information sharing. It's about creating a collaborative environment, having the community as collaborators and having a voice in the process, and creating a sense of belonging for everyone that's participating. We use a variety of tools and methods in our engagement process, whether that's public meetings, forums, online and virtual tools, and also attending events like this one so that we can speak with people firsthand. A really good engagement experience enables people to have an opportunity to voice opinions, ask questions, and also spend some time with city staff, learning about the work that we do and learning about how decisions are made. Walking tours and site visits in neighborhoods are good examples of meeting people on their own terms. Going to those places so that we can see firsthand and hear firsthand from the residents about their concerns, their ideas, and what's happening in their neighborhoods. In order to ensure that we're hearing all voices in the community, it's important that we remove as many barriers as possible to participation. So that means sometimes looking in our toolbox and taking advantage of some other tools that we have, whether that's online, virtual technology tools to reach people, extend our reach, making sure that we've given everybody an opportunity to have their voice heard. A secondary goal with all of this is to give opportunities for people to connect with city staff, learn about the work that they're doing, and understand a little bit more about how the city makes decisions. Your voice matters. It informs decision making, of course, but it also ensures that decisions reflect the wishes and values of our community, whether that's inclusivity, sustainability, equity, and more. Our commitment throughout any engagement process is that we will foster a spirit of collaboration and community-driven action that will value and listen to public input throughout those processes. We'll embrace innovation and make sure that we are reaching out to as many people as possible using a wide variety of tools, and that the decisions throughout that will represent the values of the community.
Thank you for that. So I think a lot about governance and government and the proper role and how it works. And so I always seem to come up with some sort of a quote for these, but the thing that always runs through my mind when I'm working in the civic space is the quote from Shakespeare that says, "What is the city but the people?" So it's really true that a city organization would not exist but for the people. And we mean that very sincerely, so.
Yeah, and I would say public engagement is more than just something we do, but it is an ethic of how we operate. And that doesn't mean that everyone's always going to agree or that we're always going to reach consensus, but that it really is an ethic of outreaching with the community and genuinely hearing what people have to say.
Right, so just a little story. I was here at the
Lincoln Center.
Lincoln Center. I was going to say the lyric. At the Lincoln Center one night, and it was before a show, and I was talking to a gentleman, and he said, "You know what, I don't like government." And I said, "Well, that's a viewpoint that's out there. I get it." And he goes, "You know, a bunch of people, friends of mine, we just moved out of all the cities, and we moved into an unincorporated place." And I said, "Oh, okay, great. You know, we're just having a friendly conversation." And he says, I said, "Great, what'd you do when you got there?" And he goes, "Well, a bunch of us got together and we all pitched in some money and we hired a part-time administrator so that we could get the things collectively that we couldn't get individually." And I said, "Well, sir, you started government." He goes, "No, I did not." And I said, "Well, okay, I'm not here to fight. I'm just going to go watch the show." And I came out, and he had 2 hours to think about it. And he came out, and he said, "You know, you found me again." He said, "You know what, I want to apologize." I said, "Oh, you don't have to apologize. What do you think?" And he goes, "You're exactly right. We did. We started a government." So, you know, Fort Collins is really, we talk about it transitioning from a big small town to a small big city. And so sometimes it feels distant, it feels impenetrable. People see council up behind the dais. They're just very uncomfortable in that situation because really, 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 it is no more than a group, a collection of people getting together, putting into a communal pot to get things out that we can't buy for ourselves. So we welcome each and every voice all the time, no matter how big your government is.
I love that story every time I hear it. One of the things that we are committed to in our government, as our government grows, is focusing on our mission of exceptional service for an exceptional community. And part of that is making sure that government is easy to access. We have gotten some feedback that sometimes it may be a little complicated, not as accessible as we would like it to be, and that getting information is just harder. So in our citizen survey, for the first time in ever, as far as I know, we learned that the most common place people get information now is our city website. So forever, it's been word of mouth, but it's now a digital platform. Over 200,000 people a month are visiting our city website. So we know we need to make that system more user-friendly, and we have made some improvements there already, and we'll continue to work on that. We're also working on improving functionality in some of our other digital systems. So we talk about digital and business process transformation. One of those is our legislative management system. For those of you who are local government junkies and like to follow everything that City Council is doing, the system online where you track that is going to get easier. Our GIS system, which is our mapping, we're working on a transformation there. And then a few of you may be happy to know that this summer we are going to be launching a new recreation registration system. So, yes, I've heard, yes, we know people are waiting for that one. Just a continued focus also on customer service and how we really, again, are doing that in the best way possible.
Not that we hear the frustrations and we hear some of the criticism. We're addressing that, right? But I want to give a big shout out to the hard work, each and every, 2,400 people?
Up to 2,800 if you count our seasonal and hourly employees. So
2,800 employees. And I will tell you that it is, I know that you see it too, but I just want to give them a shout out and tell this tiny little story. So about 5:45 in the morning, I'll be accurate.
First it was 7.
I know, I want to say 5:30, but it wasn't 5:30. I was running through City Park near my home, and it was sort of dark, and I had a hat on, it was cold, and so there was no way this city employee knew that I was the mayor. And I'm running there by the Club Tico, and this little maintenance car just drives up next to me and goes, "Good morning, hello." And I was like, "Oh, hello," you know. And so I just thought that's the kind of really special hard work every day of city employees coming up to just everybody and making them feel welcome and saying hello. And then the little add-on to this story is there was not a car in sight. I would have blown through that stop sign and driven that truck around. Full on stop at the stop sign, looks both ways, correct hand signal, and on his way. And I was like, there goes an A1 city employee. I actually had to turn him in to his boss, and he received a lot of, doing the hard work of being a good employee when nobody's looking. Yeah. So I just want to give a shout out because I know that 2,800 of you are doing that all the time.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. Yes, thank you. And I will say that's not by accident. We're very intentional, put a lot of effort into how we are attracting, recruiting, and retaining talent. Part of the ARPA funds that we talked about earlier, we were able to use to invest in supporting our recruitment efforts at the city. As a result of that, we have seen more applicants coming in, so we have 4 times the amount of visibility to our job applications, which is important for people to see those postings. I'm really happy that 90% of people who we offer jobs to accept those positions, so that high acceptance rate is really good. And like every other company around, we also have to make sure that we're staying competitive, that there are challenges to doing that, so we'll continue to stay focused on being a competitive from a markets-based benefits and compensation perspective. But again, I just really appreciate, and I saw several of our HR partners here and appreciate all of their focus on our talent recruitment and retention.
And so now I have to prompt Kelly D to tell the story about the new employee city welcome, because it makes her smile every time.
It does make me smile, thank you. So every month I have the opportunity to meet with all of our new employees who are joining the organization. And we recently started a new part of that where people come for coffee and it's their hiring manager and the employee, and we ask them to just share quickly, like, in their first few days on the job, what's going, anything hot, what's going well, anything they need help with. And a couple of months ago, we asked that question, and there was a new employee who had recently joined our utilities team in one of the labs, and he said, well, I have something that's going well. Okay. And he shared that when he was considering applying for the city organization, he at first wasn't going to apply because he didn't think he was qualified. And then he saw language in our job posting that talked about studies have shown that women and people of color are less likely to apply for positions if they don't think that they check every single one of the boxes. But we put in our postings that we encourage people to apply because we're going to look for a combination of experience that would make them potentially the right person. And he said, I would have never applied were it not for that. And around the room I watched, and like 4 other people sort of sheepishly raised their hands, and they were like, me too. And these are amazing people who've joined our organization, so it just makes me so happy to see that we're not just talking about equity, but we're really building it into how we're doing our work. So anyway, thanks for letting me share.
I love that story.
Okay, and now I think I'm supposed to transition us again to highlight some additional work through the lightning round. Yeah!
There we go. Thank you.
That's what we're waiting for.
That's what we need. Good.
All right, so
go.
here we go. The Multicultural Business and Entrepreneur Center grew their consulting appointments by more than 40%.
Okay, great. Hired capital projects business liaison to help support and mitigate impacts of construction projects on businesses, engaging over 500 businesses last year.
We had 7,500 people attend Open Streets and another 7,500 participants for our 2 Bike to Work or Wherever days.
Deployed snow crews for 11 storms, repaved 53.3 lane miles of roadway, and everyone's favorite, filled 3,519 potholes.
Yes?
They'll be rowdy.
Well, they're getting rowdy. All right, and utilities, I need to call out utilities. They answered 116,426 customer service calls, treated 7.7 billion gallons of water, and 4.9 billion gallons of wastewater, so they get the prize for the highest number. And electric reliability was, ready, 99.9962%. That's about as close to 100 as you can get. All right, we are going to transition and start talking about some of the future projects and some of the trends that we're seeing. And again, when we think about fortifying, we really are thinking about what are some of those long-term investments that we're making in safety and infrastructure. We know that we have several capital projects that are coming up this year. One of those is the College and Trilby intersection. That continues to be one of the highest accident rates in the city. And we are very close to having all the final pieces in place to be able to start on that project that will increase the traffic flow and safety for bikes, pedestrians, and motorists. And it will have fully ADA accessible sidewalks and crosswalks, which if you've been by that intersection, you know it is pretty bad right now. So we're really looking forward to that project.
That's great. Street improvements help traffic and they help safety. But I'm going to say something very sad, that we still have too many traffic deaths. Even though this council adopted Vision Zero action plan with a goal of 0 deaths by 2032. Last year, bicycle and motorcycle crashes with injury or fatality increased by 45%.
That's a sobering statistic. It's one that has definitely gotten the attention of, again, our traffic and teams in police services. That is a priority for them. We're looking at infrastructure investments, as we've shared, for intersection design. And we also want to put a call to all of you. A lot of this is also reliant on individual driver, pedestrian, cyclist safety. And so we need everyone in the community to help us in this goal, to also be aware and, just looking out for safety, not distracted driving, those kind of things. And it's my turn again, isn't it? Okay. Another one of the projects that we have in the capital space coming up is the Oak Street project. This is a stormwater project that will help significantly reduce flooding in the downtown area. It is set to begin this summer. A very large project, $40 million, also one of the largest capital projects that we have ever done. So Connection, as you mentioned, was the largest in Fort Collins history. Any guesses on the second largest? Where are my transportation folks? Max, yep, Max is number 2, and Oak Street will be the third.
Halligan Reservoir received its final environmental impact statement, which is a significant milestone, and construction could begin as early as 2026.
And again, for Halligan, a big part of this is water storage. One of the challenges that we are facing, and again, we are not alone in this, is in climate change. And so when we think about the importance of water storage, we know that Fort Collins has less water storage than many of our neighboring communities. And so that is something in this region that's important for us to be attentive to. We're also looking at some other things as we think about resiliency, an urban wildfire plan. So Fort Collins had a plan that was last done in 2011. Thanks to a grant through the Colorado State Forest Service, we are able to update that plan. Our partners at Poudre Fire Authority, our emergency services and preparedness folks are working together this year to get that plan updated. And then just in the city organization, things like we now have a plan for extreme heat events, and we have a plan for extreme cold events. And so again, we're really being attentive to knowing that these changes are happening and how do we prepare for them and address them.
A big part of that is our Climate Future Plan. And I will say Fort Collins is really early on planning for the future and recognizing climate change. 1997 was the first time I think the first plan came out. So, but we also have to recognize that last year was the hottest year on record globally. So we have to mitigate and we have to also adapt. The city continues to be very committed to our climate goals. We've made some notable progress in our greenhouse gas emissions and in renewable energy space, but we have a lot of work to do, and this will take the city, our regional partners, and as individuals.
One of the changes that's coming that is intended to help in this space will also have benefits in terms of reducing wear and tear on neighborhood streets, less truck traffic, neighborhood quality, is our residential trash contracting. So that service starts on September 30th. I won't make a show of hands, but I bet most of you at this point have received a letter or a phone call or a postcard or all of the above. So the deadline for selecting your trash cart size is April 30th. There's some cards out in the foyer area. So again, that is a new service that is coming starting September 30th, and that was one of those 31 council priorities that was implemented, and we're now taking action to operationalize.
Great. So we've been talking about some big projects coming up, and let's talk about some trends that are going to impact us locally and regionally. So let's see. I don't know if we're really we feel like we're at an inflection point, right? So it feels, and I don't know if every single generation feels like this, or there's a time in everyone's life when you really feel like this is sort of a turning point. It might have been the sort of the post-pandemic, those sorts of things, but we are really looking into the future, and we're talking about housing shortage, affordability and choice, jobs, demographic shifts. The Community Foundation of Northern Colorado just issued its Intersections report. If you haven't read that, it's available on their website, and it's quite interesting. It takes a look at us individually and regionally. It has some stunning data and some projections for our region. One interesting stat, which is relevant for Fort Collins, is that by 2040, 23% of the population will be over at the age of 65. So that has certain implications for our economy, our workforce, and our health care.
Yeah, and this is an area where we really are looking regionally. So by 2050, the state projects that the Larimer population is going to increase by 37%. The Weld County population, though, is projected to increase by 84%. Yeah, so again, how we're thinking as a region about the pressure on housing, childcare, our infrastructure and roads, we know that we have to collaborate and innovate in these spaces. We're also seeing some nuance in that space that while the region in the Larimer County region is growing, that Fort Collins is growing at a much lesser rate. So our growth rate has stayed pretty flat over the last recent years. And when we look at neighboring places like Teignmouth, Wellington, Windsor, Johnstown, that's really where the growth is happening in large ways. And so one of the things we just have to think about is how does that impact city services, but also some of our other partner agencies. So I know you have all likely heard about the school district is thinking about how this will impact as population shifts to the east side of the boundaries, aligning more with Teignmouth and Wellington. One of the other stats I heard from them is that right now we have fewer kindergartners than we have high school seniors. So again, think about 10 years from now what that looks like. Those are just some of the trends that are coming up and that we're attentive to as we think about next steps.
Right, it really shapes how we think about our future and fortify our community. So we're doing some work to strengthen the local economy, and last year we adopted the Economic Strategic Plan with certain focus areas, which took a thoughtful approach to business retention, expansion, and attraction to ensure that small businesses thrive, to support talent and workforce development, and reposition ourselves as a real innovative hub in the region. And along those lines, we had some recent exciting news related to a council priority that was mentioned at our retreat. I think that was a Saturday. I know that was a Saturday, and I think the grant was
Monday.
Announced on Monday. So I said, well, that was quick work. So it was very quick. One of 10 regional innovation engines named by the National Science Foundation with a $15 million grant over the next 2 years. Additionally, a $160 million grant over the next 10 years to focus on climate resilience and economic development. And this will have a huge impact on our region.
And in carrying on in the theme of partnerships, this really was a partnership. It was led by Innosphere Ventures, huge participation from Colorado State University, also some other universities in Colorado and Wyoming that we're not going to talk about. Municipalities from both of those states, our federal labs, several of which are here in Fort Collins, industry partners, and our economic development organization. So again, the power of partnership and the investment that is going to occur in our community as we look at jobs that really are, again, consistent with our values. We would be remiss as we're talking about trends if we didn't also talk about the continued need to focus on housing. We know that there are jobs in Fort Collins and people are commuting in for those jobs in many cases. Again, that same Community Foundation report that the mayor referenced noted that on any given day, 40% of the regional population is traveling between our communities. And the number one thing that I think we hear from the community is housing. And so we know that people are concerned about the affordability and the price of housing. We know they're concerned about choices and wanting to have options that fit their family need. One of the statistics that I recently heard was that area median income here for a family of 4 is $113,000. So that's $113,000. When you look at the homes that were sold last year in Fort Collins, of all the homes that were sold, only 20% of them would have been affordable to a family that was earning that $113,000. So our goal is 66%. So again, we know that this is a big challenge for us.
It also helps with some of our climate goals too. If we can provide housing for the people who live here or who work here and they can live here, it reduces that commuting in a high ozone area, which would be great too. Part of the question of housing, in addition to supply, is occupancy, right? So it's been estimated that there are 15,000 bedrooms in Fort Collins that could be filled, and we have a current occupancy code of, I think everyone knows, U+2. So council took a resolution last fall to revisit that question and that code this spring, really looking to see what the right fit is for our community in a housing short area. The state legislature is considering a bill right now, and it's gone through the House. I think it's over to the Senate, so we'll obviously have to look and see what that does and how it impacts our community. The other thing we did since we've been on, the first council term I was on, was really establish and beef up the public nuisance code, because what you want to do is make sure that the vibrancy, the safety, the quiet, the calm that people love in their neighborhoods, the things that they cherish about living there, will be ensured through the public nuisance code, even if the occupancy regulations change. So those kind of go hand in hand in that, and we'll be talking about that this spring.
So as we wrap up kind of the conversation about housing, there is a lot of good work going on. We've talked about the challenge, but we have many community partners that are working to provide affordable housing. And so we want to do a quick lightning round with some of those projects.
Thank you. I was waiting for that. Oak 140 opened with 79 units, which includes several wheelchair accessible units. First low-income housing tax credit project for downtown workers.
Hartside Hill, which is near Trilby and LeMay, is under construction, and that will provide 72 income-restricted apartments.
And Housing Catalyst, good job, was just named one of the first recipients of Proposition 123. It's the State Affordable Housing Fund for $1.6 million to build 73 affordable housing units in East Fort Collins.
So there is progress.
There's some. We're going to switch gears to our last category for tonight, which is democracy and civic participation. And this is a conversation about the future of our community in addition to the projects and the trends, right? The issues are not simple. The democratic processes we have in place are strong. We keep reinforcing them through work on council, and people need to be participating together to create our future. I would like to assure you, though, that we do have really good rules on council for public participation. Our processes, we keep refining and including and broadening some of the rules that guide us as we do our work.
Yeah. Mayor, I recently heard you were on a panel, and someone asked you the question in the sort of sphere of all of these big, weighty issues that are facing us, how do we create a sense of urgency around them?
Well, I just kind of had a knee-jerk reaction. I said, well, we don't, My thinking is the role of government and council electeds and staff is we don't intentionally create a sense of urgency and anxiety. I mean, we have the federal election coming up. We don't need to do any of that. What we need to do is prioritize the work and get down to it and do the work of the people, right? Create a sense of steadiness, of leadership, of calm and earnestness to get the work done on behalf of the people.
Yeah, and part of, yes. And you all are such an important part of that, and for our community to be building our civic capacity and understanding so that you can engage in these dialogues and help us really create community together. And there are some ways that that is happening already, and so again, we're going to turn to a video to hear from a few people directly.
I strongly believe that democracy begins at home. We are fortunate to live in a country that holds individual rights in such high regard, but we oftentimes forget that those rights come with responsibilities. And responsibility is to really respect one another and to also participate in the democracy we've been given.
I serve on the Human Relations Commission, and on that commission I serve as the educational chair. And what I do in that role is we bring different educational programs to local Fort Collins residents so that they can learn about different topics related to inclusion and equity and just how we can live better together as a community.
One of the good things about city work was that I shared whatever I learned from the city work with my community. I think it was like when you join to city work, it's not about you. You can share your knowledge or what you gain from the class to other ones, to your community.
I decided to join the board because I've lived everywhere. I've moved 29 times, and Fort Collins is my favorite place in the world, and being on a board is is my way of giving back to a town I love so much. The boards and commissions are the lifeblood of our community. They're the opportunity for citizens to take action and advocate for our communities. It's our way to give ourselves voices.
Following City Works 101, which allowed us to see kind of how the city works. I mean, the name is appropriate because the fact is we really were taken throughout the city in places that you don't normally get to see. From traffic engineering to water treatment to water reclamation to the streets department. It was really eye-opening to actually be able to see and talk to the people who get things done each and every day in our town.
When you go to this CityWorks and you learn about why things are being done this way and what process they had to go to decide to do it this way, and it's just a lot more complicated than everybody thinks, and it's helpful, I think, for the community, and it also helps you decide what you want to do to get more involved in the community.
When we were looking at different places to move to, Fort Collins really stood out by being a big city amenities, but really a small town feel. And so I wanted to make sure that I could get involved in that process and feel like I was giving back and being a part of shaping the community, especially around housing policy itself.
Fort Collins is an incredible place to live, and there's a lot of intentionality. It didn't just happen by accident, it happened by design. So I think the more that we get involved and realize that local participation really does make a difference, we'll have an excellent community now and 100 years in the future.
So as you heard in the video, there are a lot of ways to get involved, and we are going to wrap up our last lightning round with a few of those. All right, so let's start with CityWorks. We have had more than 400 people go through CityWorks since it started in 2007. Yeah, many of those people are now on boards. Some of them are on city council.
That's right. We have
Maybe a mayor?
not CityWorks.
Okay.
Boards and commissions, yes. 23 boards and commissions. We've done work to improve them. This year's applications increased 53%. So thank you to all who have served, who will serve, and who'd like to serve.
And I cannot say enough about all of our community members who volunteer for this community. Last year we had 6,887 volunteers who contributed 105,624 hours to our local government. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It means so much. And we also just want to recognize there are a lot of ways for people to get involved. So some of those may be big ways, some of those may be formal, some of them may be small and informal, and it's not only your local government, right? We know it's schools and faith organizations, your neighborhood, wherever that is. We just encourage you to continue to fortify our community by getting involved and making a difference.
Right. I always say that there's no hierarchy in community service or creating this sense of belonging that we've been talking about. Some people come up to me and say that they'd like to be like me, which is always a strange thing for me to hear. But I think what they mean is they'd like to be an elected because they see that as sort of one of the, some sort of a hierarchy in public service. But there is no hierarchy, right? It all depends upon where you are in your life, and you can equally contribute to your community by being a good partner, a good parent, a good friend, a good neighbor. We're all in this together. One day you might be elected, but we're not going to be elected forever. You could be on a board, a commission. You can start a community potluck. There's so many things you can do just to be a person in the community that is really part of what makes Fort Collins great. So I just want to say that, and then I want to say at the very end, we are always stronger together. So thank you for coming. And Kelly's going to take us out.
Thank you. All right, as we, before we transition into a reception where we have food and we have cash bar. For those of you who were here last year, it's cash bar, not an open bar.
She promised an open bar last year.
Some great information booths, but will you please all join me in doing a quick round of thank you to our staff at the Lincoln Center who graciously hosts us. So thank you to them. To the place setting company who helps us with some of the logistics and details. And lastly, a giant thank you to our City Communications and Public Involvement Office who produces this entire event and puts a remarkable amount of work into pulling it together. So thank you, CPIO. And with that, let's go build community. Have a great night, Fort Collins.
Thank you for coming.